Well, it's a very great pleasure for me to be visiting Pittsburgh today, at least via video link.
Hi,
And
Andrew.
and you will see on your screen there Cynthia DeAlmeida, who is the principal oboist of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. Why am I talking to Cynthia? Well, she's performing the Vaughan Williams Oboe Concerto at Heinz Hall on two dates at the end of January and right at the beginning of February, conducted by Sir Mark Elder, of course, who is very well known to Vaughan Williams Society members. Welcome to you, Cynthia, and thanks for your time.
Oh, Andrew, thank you. I'm honored to be speaking about this great concerto and to be a small part of the Vaughan Williams Society today. Thank you.
Well, look, we first of all have got to laser in on the person to whom it's dedicated, and that's
Yeah.
Leon Goossens.
Yeah.
Before we joined up a moment ago, I did a quick look at the history of oboists, and in fact, there are so many more oboists in history than I'd sort of imagined, really, who sort of stand out. But so, where do we place Leon Goossens? How important is he in the 20th century history of oboists?
I think in the 20th century, he would be on the top. There are so many pieces. I made a list for this interview of the pieces that were dedicated or commissioned by him that I have played or recorded. I cannot believe. First of all, I'm a nut for Malcolm Arnold, and they must have been good friends. And when you asked me earlier in preparation for this whether I knew how the Vaughan Williams Concerto came about, well, they were contemporaries. You can imagine they had great respect for each other. I'm sure Ralph Vaughan Williams would not have written a concerto for someone just for the money. He had to have respect for that player. And, in our fractured world, people are nationalistic about many things, including instruments, and certainly the oboe, because our reed and our instrument is completely different from other countries in America versus England versus Italy versus Holland versus Germany versus Austria. However, Leon Goossens is multinational. The respect for him is in every country, including my heart, and his brother, Eugene, who conducted here in the States, people that I knew, for example, Max Rudolph. So other great conductors knew Eugene Goossens. And my school of playing in America is called the Tabuteau or Philadelphia School of Playing. And I was listening also in preparation for my own work on the concerto to Leon Goossens' recording of it, which was recorded in 1952. He premiered it it was premiered in 1944. But what I hear remnants of my own heritage. John Delancey, who was my teacher, was Richard Woodhams, one of my many teachers, but my most important teacher, Richard Woodhams of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And his teacher was John Delancey, and his teacher was Marcel Tabuteau at the Curtis Institute. So Delancey has some what we call Delanceyisms, and I hear it in Leon Goossens. You have to remember everyone was, especially when recordings came out, the Philadelphia Orchestra being first American orchestra to record, people could actually listen to each other. And I also wanted to say about recordings, Andrew, I remember this. I have several of the Vaughan Williams that I love, that if we have time, I would talk about. But there is nothing like live performance. An oboe in particular, the sound of an oboe cannot be gathered correctly or perfectly on any recording.
That's interesting. That's interesting that you should say that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
but for Cynthia, I mean, I did my own. We both of us been doing our homework on this.
Fun. Oh,
I did a quick refresher course in Leon Goossen just to refamiliarize myself with his sound, and I went through a whole range of things really quite quickly. But I was completely bowled over by his playing,
yes.
and I've got my own thoughts on why that is. But in a nutshell, Cynthia,
For me,
what is it? What is
for
it
me,
that makes
for
it
me,
special?
for me, as a classically trained musician, we work with a metronome. Everything has to be just right, just right. And what I hear in Goossens playing is a freedom. It's a freedom of expression and vibrato. And I know people talk about the French versus the German sound of his time, and even maybe of today, the use of vibrato. For me, the Philadelphia School of Playing is a very singing vibrato, and that's what I hear in his playing. That some arguably would say the German was a thicker, darker sound with less vibrato, and he was perhaps the best of both worlds
Yeah.
in that respect.
Yeah, but you use the word singing there, and that's what really came across to me. It was as if I was hearing the human voice
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And
Wonderful.
taking time with things. He did not in this concerto in the recording in 1952. Leon Goossens did not seem to be straitjacketed with metronome markings. And a lot of us who are classically trained, there's that age old argument about Beethoven and the metronome itself and when it was invented and blah blah blah. And when I listen to one of my favorite recordings, it is the Sir Mark Elder recording. Well, it's not Sir Mark Elder, it's Stefan Roncourt, who I have not met. He's about eight. I saw his birth date. He's about 8 years younger than I am, but I would love to meet him. I love his freedom,
Yeah,
his choices of tempi, and especially in this concerto, there's so much cadenza material,
yeah,
freedom. How
yeah,
do you want to do it? Do you want to, a lot of people do things extremely fast, which is very, very flourishy and impressive. I'm I'm not of that ilk. That's not what I'm listening for is sound, beauty of sound, and giving people, if it's possible, to give
yeah,
people that otherworldly experience and goose pimples and the hair standing up on your edge because the sound is so beautiful, or a shading of a dynamic
yeah,
coming away from something. And I feel that Stefan does that beautifully, as does Jonathan Small, a British. I think Stefan is Canadian, but lives in Scotland, I think. And this is Jonathan Small with Vernon Handley and the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic. Interestingly, the premiere of the Vaughan Williams Concerto with Leon Goossens was with the Liverpool Philharmonic. Now, I don't know if they changed their name to Royal Liverpool Philharmonic.
yeah. That's right now. But I mean, it's an interesting thing, Cynthia. I mean, I did my research, and there's so little really written about exactly why Vaughan Williams wrote this concerto at that particular point. But tell us a little bit about that first performance, which didn't happen, and then it did happen in Liverpool. What
Well,
happened?
it's very, Andrew, as we said earlier when we talked, it's very timely in today's world of several wars going on. What we Americans have never experienced except for 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. But those were isolated and very far apart. We never went through a blitzkrieg. We never went through on our soil, World War I or World War II on our soil. And the British have, English, Irish, French, German, everybody has, but in particular, the London Blitzkrieg. I've studied a bit of history and I studied a little World War II in my undergrad because I'm so interested in history. And as a member of an orchestra that tours all over the world now, I've been in the orchestra 34 years. And before that, I was in the Great Philadelphia Orchestra touring. So I've seen and made time on tours to go to historical points often to try to understand what people have gone through. And now Ukraine and Gaza and Israel and Syria. And, so imagine trying to write music during this time and get it performed. I'm almost can't count how many times I've been honored to play with the Pittsburgh Symphony at the proms. And we may be coming in 2026, not sure. But so this was scheduled to be premiered at the proms with, I don't know who the conductor would have been, but July 5th, 1944. And then a particularly horrible kind of rocket was
The flying bombs. Yeah.
shot in London, and they couldn't. So thankfully, they did 3 months later in September. I think September 30th, 1944, but it wasn't in London. It was up in Liverpool.
And who conducted in Liverpool?
That was Malcolm Sargent.
Yeah, yes, of course.
So perhaps he was also going to be the one at the canceled premiere. Perhaps Malcolm Sargent. I'm not sure. I don't have that information.
Yeah, and I couldn't find a review. Okay, I was working in a hurry, and I couldn't find a review of that first performance. But it then came down to London, and wonder of wonders, it wasn't performed by one of the name orchestras, but I saw it was the Bromley and Chislehurst Orchestra, conducted by is it Marjorie White? Yes, Marjorie White in May 1945. And again, I couldn't find a review of that.
Wow. Well, that's not here in Pittsburgh with this great orchestra. With the demise of journalism and print journalism, we also often have fabulous concerts that don't get reviewed. In 2018, I performed the Mozart Concerto here with Manfred Honeck, and this was the premiere of that concerto in this city, and there was no review.
let's just think about, I mean, your enthusiasm for the concerto is coming across already.
Oh boy.
How do you place it? I mean, you've got Leon Goossens, Bax, Bliss, Britten, Arnold, Finzi, Howells, Gordon Jacob, Elgar writing for him. I mean, how highly do you rate this as a piece of music, as a concerto?
Well, yeah, of the concertos for oboe with this orchestra, I have performed the Mozart. I've done the Bach double concerto with Vladimir Spivakov, Pinchas Zuckerman, Andres Cardenas, our former concertmaster, and Noah Bendix Bagley, who is now the first concertmaster of the Berlin Philharmonic, but he was our concertmaster. I've done that many times. I love the Oboe d'Amore. I've done the Oboe d'Amore concerto in A major, Jean France's Flower Clock, of course, Richard Strauss and Haydn, and my favorite of all. And also they've commissioned 4 concertos for me. One by Leonardo Ballata, here the Pittsburgh Symphony, but Leonardo Ballata, Lucas Richmond, Alan Fletcher, and just this past June, they honored my husband, my new husband. We've been married 3 years. He's the principal horn, William Caballero, and we chose Michael Doherty, and he wrote a beautiful double concerto for us called Songs of the Open Road, which we premiered last June here in the Pittsburgh Symphony with Manfred Honeck. So you can see that I am, for an orchestral musician, I am often asked to play concertos. The last time I played this beautiful concerto with this orchestra was 1996. I was 36 years old. I had always loved it. I mean, it gives me goosepimples to hear this, and the Thomas Tallis Fantasia, the Lark Ascending. I get goosepimples. So to have a piece, arguably some would argue it's not as great of a work as any of those I just mentioned. However, it has snippets of, I think he was writing the 5th symphony. Rafe was writing the 5th symphony during the time or right before he wrote this. And some of his discarded material became part of the oboe concerto. I'll take it. I'll take the discarded material.
Of course you will.
I don't know what it was, but sadly, I remember ever playing a Vaughan Williams symphony in this Pittsburgh Symphony, and I'm going to do something about that. We'll see. But it is at the top for me. It always has been.
Really, at the top? At the top.
It's at the top. Well, Mozart, yes, and of course, but why is it at the top?
Yeah,
because it's and it, you know, and I always wanted to say too, we have mutual friends in Sir Mark Elder, but also Neil Black. I worked with Neil, played with Neil in the Marlborough Music Festival many years ago, and got friendly with he and Jan. And I wanted to do a shout out to if Jan might be hearing this, because I loved him so much, and we talked about the Vaughan Williams for sure. He and I. It sings to me, goes to my heart because of the melodies. The technical stuff is interesting and fascinating to play, and the cadenza-like material is beautiful. But really, the 3rd movement, and some people argue that's the most symphonic of the 3 movements. It has so much depth to it, so much rich interweaving of strings with me. But I'm also a mother, and I was a new mother at the time of the first performance of this for me. And I wanted to be a mother since I was 20. I was married at 25, but I wanted someone to call me mommy for a long, long time. So when I was performing this in 1996, I had 2 children. They were 1-year-old and 3-year-old, 3 years old at the time. And I found words to my children, Veronica and Danny. I put them to the melodies in the 3rd movement. I wrote it right in the music. So performing it here with Pittsburgh, with my children present, and feeling as, you know, overwhelmed with love that I have. Now, I don't believe at all, because he didn't have children, which is a shame. I don't believe Ralph Vaughan Williams meant for anyone to have a programmatic picture in their mind of children. However, and he was against, even though we all have programmatic ideas, and many of his, especially choral works, you know, well, for heaven's sakes, he wasn't religious, and he wrote some of the most beautiful religious hymns and music for choral, especially choral and orchestra, of anyone ever. I think from what I have read, he respected people's religion, but he didn't feel it in his heart. Those of us who are maybe perhaps more progressive feeling might say that can't be true. In his heart, he must have had the feeling of.
But Cynthia, I guess it's one thing saying that Vaughan Williams didn't have a program in his mind, or didn't want to admit that he had a program in mind. Yes. I'm just wondering, what images come to your mind, perhaps about England when you're
Well,
playing?
oh yes. Well, yes. And I don't know if you believe in past lives, but my first husband, I was married for 36 years, and he and I would go to London. We went there for our, well, we couldn't afford a honeymoon, but we won a free trip to London, long story short, at a concert. So we went to London for our quote unquote honeymoon, and we love everything English. I'm obsessed with the royal family, blah, blah, blah. And I think on a more general human approach, almost all people long for something they remember or used to have or never had. And for a lot of people, including composers, we can go to Mahler and Brahms and Mozart and Handel, and they would go to the country to write. Their most important works were at some shack in the woods or in the mountains, in Austria, in Germany, in England. And I think I am a Vermonter. I come from country, but I'm a city girl. I don't want to live in the country, but my heart will always be there with the glistening snow, the sound of horses whinnying. We still use the old sleigh with the sleigh bells at Christmas. People had horses, and so I do think this is a contemplative hearkening back to another time for him before the war, both wars. He lived through both those wars. His friends who died in, was it Butterworth, the great composer?
Butterworth, yeah, George Butterworth, yes.
Died, so tragedy. And, some people believe classical music is dying. They've said that since 150 years. The demise of the American orchestra is, I collect an antique music magazine by Theodore Presser called The Etude. I collect them. I have some from the 1890s. And in one of those, I think it's 1897, one of the articles is The Demise of the American Symphony Orchestra, 1897. So something like that year. So the thing is, I think people have to go through some tragedy, deaths in their family, sicknesses, wars, for sometimes for our music to go straight to their heart, like the American story of the Grinch who stole Christmas. When that music gets to your heart and you are open to it, then you can't get enough of it. And I think there's no reason to worry that most of our audiences are gray-haired. Most of the people going to museums are gray-haired. Why? They have more time on their hands, perhaps because they're retired and perhaps more funds, but it means something so much more to them than when they were younger, because they have had loss.
Yeah. Well, Cynthia, you're captivating me by all that you're saying here. There's so much to take away from it. Will you get a chance to talk to the audience before you play this?
They always want us to. It's very difficult. I will be extremely nervous. Remember, an orchestral oboist or musician of any kind, except for maybe the concertmaster, is not a soloist in the concerto. I do this every 3 years. It's an anomaly that I did one in June and now also January. So it's not very often. And our hall is very large. It was built in 1927. It's called Heinz Hall for the Ketchup Company, the wonderful family, the Heinz family. But it was Lowe's Penn Theater, built to be a movie theater. And it holds just about a little under 2,700. Now, in Sir Royal Albert Hall, 7,000 or whatever, that's nothing. But for most other UK concert halls, that's quite large. And I'm not saying it'll be full, but it's frightening to be out on the front of the edge of the stage when you're usually back in your woodwind buddies. So no, I'm not sure I want to speak beforehand. Yeah. However, sometimes they record us and put it up on a screen right before you play, and because it is enjoyable for audience to connect with the soloist, but also to hear more about the piece.
Yeah, just finally, Cynthia, you've got Sir Mark Elder there, who's conducted so much Vaughan Williams with such distinction. I'm just interested in the sort of relationship in this sort of situation here. Here's Sir Mark from England with all his history of conducting Vaughan Williams, and yet you have a very definite idea of how you want to play it. And how do things work in rehearsal in a situation like that?
I can tell you, he's already added a little more rehearsal time for this piece than it normally would get. And first of all, I do have a relationship with him. Yay. Not a personal relationship, but the Pittsburgh Symphony. He was just here in 2023. We love him. And when it was offered, this concerto was offered, and they said it was Sir Mark Elder, I begged to do the Vaughan Williams, and he immediately said yes. So he and I will we start rehearsing. Usually an orchestra has of a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is the dress rehearsal. Now, usually concertos don't even get anything till the Thursday. The Thursday afternoon one will be the one for the concerto. So you get one rehearsal of 2.5 hours, and then you get your run through, and that's it. But he knows this is a difficult one for timing. So he said, Cynthia, he wrote to our vice president of artistic and asking, let's have Wednesday, just the half hour, the last half hour of Wednesday's rehearsal, just to run through. So people go, string players will go home and go, oh, wow, I think I better work on that area or whatever. But also Tuesday, we will be getting together for what's called a tempo meeting. And I have our orchestra pianist. I have I have reserved the stage many times in the beginning of January and the middle of January, just to have it to myself, to get that, to have the acoustic of the big hall and play it with a piano accompaniment. It won't be the same, but then the pianist is learning my ins and outs, my tempi changes, and then we will present that to Sir Mark. And I have no doubt that he will respect the soloist's wishes. But I always love to learn from conductors. I've learned so much. So I will also ask his opinion. And it will be a combination of those things, I'm sure.
Yeah. Cynthia, it's been such a delight talking to you and hearing all these thoughts that are buzzing around in my brain. I'll need to watch this again immediately just to pick up all these amazing thoughts. All of us in the Vaughan Williams Society wish you all the best for these two performances. That's January the 31st and February the 2nd in Heinz Hall. I don't suppose there are many people who are watching this who'll be able to get there, but
well, you know what? We still have a 24-hour classical radio station, WQED Pittsburgh. And if you do WQED.org, that's the usually the email address for the website for nonprofits in America. They record them. Well, we record them and give them to them for broadcast. So it's usually broadcast a year later, but sometimes they're live broadcasts. So the Pittsburgh Symphony won't be doing a simulcast, but WQED might. I should have found that out before, but people can go online and look at their schedule, and they may be able to hear it on WQED radio.
Well, we'll do some research on that and put something on the end of this video.
And Andrew, I have a question for you.
Sure, try me.
How can I join?
Oh, it would take probably about 30 seconds, Cynthia.
I would love to be an honorary member because I love his music so much, and it would connect me a little bit to him to be a member.
I will make sure you get the details, and let's take that by way of an advert to other people who may wish to join the Vaughan Williams Society after listening to what you've had to say. We'll put the details up on the end of this video. I think that's probably the best thing to do.
And I can promise those of you who are listening who may not be members, just speaking with Andrew before this interview, we had a good long hour the other day, and it made me want to join because these people research and have so much interest in wherever his music is being played all over the world. And it's a way of keeping him alive, his music alive, and his memory alive. So I would be honored to be a member.
You have been doing just that, Cynthia. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye-bye.